On January 19th, a new moon arrives, and it may be the quiet pivot that reroutes the year you were trying so hard to build. If you've been living on low battery, running on half-charged effort, or feeling like your work and your heart go unnoticed, this date could be the hinge you've been waiting for. It won't necessarily be loud. It may not come with fireworks. But because of how new moons work as amplifiers, what you decide around January 19th can be amplified into movement, visibility, or relief in the weeks that follow. I want to speak directly to you. If this is landing where you're worn out, please stay with me for a moment. If you want timely updates like this and you follow the rhythm of lunar timing, subscribe and tap notifications so you don't miss the next window. Think of a new moon as a reset point in a cycle, not a magic wand. Imagine your life like a phone battery. Over time, apps run in the background, worry, old expectations, worn habits, and your charge drops. A new moon is like a gentle charger that responds to how you plug in. It amplifies the direction you choose, not by forcing outcomes, but by intensifying the momentum you give it. If you point the arrow towards something clear, the amplified energy makes tiny shifts feel larger. If you stay scattered, the amplifier simply magnifies scatter. Most people misunderstand timing like this as a promise. Do X now and get Y forever. That's not what I'm inviting you to consider. January 19th can increase the clarity and acceleration of whatever honest intention you set. It's about alignment rather than magic, readiness rather than guarantees. The subtlety is everything. Small, decisive internal moves during this time often create outsized, long-term effect. If you've been carrying the same weight for months or years, it's likely not because you're failing. It's because some patterns have become part of your background processes. You keep showing up and getting minimal response, or no response at all. That invisibility drains you. Repeating the same actions without changing the inner direction keeps the battery low. This new moon is giving you a moment to cut a thread, one single thing you decide to stop carrying. Not a long list. One honest, clean decision. Before January 19th, choose one thing you are done carrying. That could be a fear that keeps you small, an identity that no longer fits, a habit that uses up your energy, or a repeating storyline that shapes how you negotiate relationships or money. This is not a ritual. It's a mental and emotional pivot, a clear, inward sentence. I am no longer carrying X. Say it to yourself once, with conviction. That single choice is the hinge. The moon's energy can amplify it. Why one thing? Because an arrow needs one straight line. If you try to aim in 10 directions at once, the force disperses. When you let one heavy strap fall, space opens. Psychologically, clarity reduces friction. Energetically, the new moon tends to magnify whatever direction you've chosen. Over time, that clarity invites small external confirmations. Someone's message, a tone change in a conversation, an application that moves forward, and those confirmations feed momentum. The battery doesn't jump from 10% to 100% overnight, but you begin to see the charge increase in steady, reliable increments. There's another idea to hold gently: energetic debt. Think of it like a tab of unresolved lessons and patterns that the system keeps running until something changes. Energetic debt accumulates when experiences repeat without being integrated. The same disappointment, the same overlooked efforts, the same boundary ignored. Often these debts reach a point where the universe, however you describe it, will stop renewing the same lesson and triggers an expiration. January 19th, for many, marks such an expiration for patterns that have outlived their usefulness. That doesn't mean instant resolution for everything, but it can mean the conditions for a release appear. The pushback softens, doors that were closed begin to shift, or the person who never called suddenly reaches out. You'll see this unfold not as a spectacle but as small previews, subtle signs that something has begun to move. Watch for these moments around January 19th. A message you didn't expect, a tone shift in a meeting that finally recognizes your contribution, an unexpected yes where there was only no before, a delay that turns into favor because it aligns timing in your direction. Other examples are an old contact resurfacing with an opportunity, a quiet piece of clarity in your own thinking that lets you say no, and a small mistake that somehow places you exactly where you needed to be. Each of these is a soft debut of a larger turn. Notice them. They are the moon's way of whispering that the amplified direction you've chosen is beginning to register. Let me offer a few concrete scenarios so you can picture what this might look like in areas that matter: career, relationships, finances, and inner clarity. On the career side, an idea you've been pitching might suddenly be noticed by the right person. The email you thought went into a void returns with a thoughtful reply. A meeting that felt routine ends with someone asking you to present. In relationships, a conversation that usually circles the same grievance lands differently, maybe because you finally let go of an expectation and spoke plainly. And that shift opens a new kind of listening. Financially, a stubborn block loosens not because of a windfall, but because a postponed payment or a delayed invoice comes through when timing finally aligns with your needs. Internally, a fog you've been moving through clears enough for you to see which decision actually matters, and that clarity changes the next 3 steps you take. Keep in mind, none of these are guaranteed. They are possibilities that become more accessible when your internal direction is uncluttered. The new moon is an amplifier, not a guarantee. Your surrendering of a single burden doesn't override all variables, but it often changes the vector of how events unfold. There's an important distinction to make about visibility. Visibility doesn't always equal a promotion, a headline, or instant recognition. Sometimes visibility returns as a small, vital correction. Someone finally remembers your work. A project gains a tiny spark, or your network rearranges in a way that favors you. Visibility after January 19th may start as subtle recognition that then compounds into larger opportunities because the initial conditions have changed. The tide shifts first in the shallows before revealing the deeper current. Hidden help shows up most powerfully when your energy is clear. Hidden help is not necessarily dramatic or heroic. It's often quiet and unexpected. It can be a stranger forwarding an article that opens a door, a former colleague who remembers you at just the right moment, a friend recommending you to someone, or a scheduling glitch that makes you available for a meeting that leads to a long-awaited yes. These small coincidences are not random noise when you're aimed in one direction. They're the soft stitches that create a new fabric. Notice these helpers and be open to small courtesies and slight adjustments that arrive without fanfare. Now, how do you prepare practically without turning this into a checklist? Keep it simple. Before January 19th, spend 10 minutes, once, to make one internal decision, not a ceremony, not steps to perform. Just name the thing you will no longer carry. Say it in your head. I am done carrying, name it. You can follow that with a quick image. See the weight drop from your shoulders. Watch yourself step back with lighter shoulders. Imagine a small, cleared space on a table where new things can land. Hold that image for a moment. That's enough to set the direction the new moon can amplify. If naming it feels impossible, start by noticing the stories you tell yourself when you feel stuck. Which story repeats? I'm not visible. I don't have the skills. I always get overlooked. Pick one sentence among those and declare you are no longer carrying that sentence as fact. That mental pivot often dislodges the pattern enough for the new moon's amplification to work with you. As you do this, keep attention on the small signs I mentioned. Around January 19th, watch for the following: An unexpected message from someone who matters, a shift in tone during a conversation or meeting that hints at new openness, a delayed response turning into an opportunity, and a small coincidence that aligns with your chosen direction, like an old contact reaching out or a piece of needed information appearing at the perfect moment. These are not dramatic miracles, they are previews. They often arrive as hints or small corrections rather than grand announcements. Let me tell you about 3 brief examples to make this concrete. There was a woman I'll call Maya, who had been quietly pitching a project for months and kept getting polite deferrals. She decided before a new moon to stop carrying the fear of being too visible. She didn't throw a ritual. She simply stopped rehearsing an old story that kept her tentative. The week after the new moon, a junior colleague sent a forwarded email from a leader who said, "This looks interesting. Can we see more?" That tiny shift in attention became the doorway for a funded pilot months later. A second example. A man I'll call Aaron had been waiting on a payment that always arrived late and with friction. He released the identity of being someone who is always chasing money. Shortly after January 19th, the owed party reversed course, not with a windfall, but with a clearer, timely payout, and a note that acknowledged the value of the work. He described it as quiet relief, not fireworks. A third example. A person named Lena stopped carrying a relationship pattern where she apologized first to preserve peace. She decided she would no longer take on that responsibility alone. Within weeks of the new moon, an honest conversation landed differently. Both people adjusted, and the dynamic began to reset. Again, none of these were guarantees, but each began with a one-thing decision and followed with subtle responses that grew stronger over time. Part of why this works is timing meeting readiness. The new moon amplifies, and when you're ready, it often brings an expiration for what's no longer useful. Think of energetic debt like an old loan finally being called. The account closes only after the lesson is clear. When a debt expires, the pressure that kept the cycle running lifts. That might feel like a loosening, a softening, or simply a reordering of priorities that lets some things fall away. You won't always get an explanation. Sometimes you'll only notice that you're carrying less weight and that doors you'd stopped knocking on are suddenly ajar. I want to emphasize patience and attention. The first signs after January 19th are often previews, not the full payoff. The moon's job is to nudge and amplify direction. The rest unfolds through small decisions, continued clarity, and ordinary follow-through. Expect a preview, a conversation that goes differently, a message that opens a door, a delay that turns to favor, and then tend to what follows. Don't demand immediate proof. The quiet return of momentum is a healthier kind of progress. It preserves your energy while it builds. As we move toward January 19th, remember to notice the small things that point the way. Keep a mental notepad or an actual note app where you jot the tiny confirmations. Heard back from X, meeting tone changed, old contact reconnected, clarity about next step. Those notes become evidence of movement and help you track how the amplifier is working over time. They also train you to recognize the hidden help when it arrives. You'll see patterns you might have missed otherwise. There's a final piece I want to give you. A short, internal decision prompt you can do right now, in the quiet of wherever you are. You don't need anything else but your attention. Take a breath and let the idea of January 19th stand at the front. Now, name one thing you are done carrying. Say it briefly in your mind. Be specific enough to know what it is, and brief enough to carry it in a sentence. As you name it, imagine the weight lifting off your shoulders and a small, empty space appearing in front of you, like a cleared table. Picture the arrow of your intent pointing clearly through that space. Hold that image for a few moments and let yourself feel, however faintly, lighter. That's the decision. You don't need to perform anything else. After you do this, watch how your attention shifts in the days around January 19th. Notice if your perspective loosens, if a message appears, if a conversation lands differently. If nothing obvious happens immediately, hold the direction anyway. The new moon's amplification often continues to work in the background, showing itself over days and sometimes weeks. Keep an eye out for the small confirmations, those are your previews, and let them inform your next steps. So what comes next? Expect a subtle reversal first, followed by growing momentum. Visibility can return as small recognitions that compound. Hidden help often arrives quietly. An unexpected email, a new connection, an accidental alignment of schedules. Your inner clarity will sharpen, and decisions that felt heavy may become easier. Remember, the power is not in forcing outcomes, but in aligning your intention with a clean inner direction. When you let go of one thing before January 19th, you make room for something else to land, not by demand, but by allowance. As you move toward that date, be kind to yourself. This is not a test of worthiness. It's a timing window for those who choose alignment and clarity. If you miss something, you can always recalibrate. If you feel resistance to letting go, treat it like information. What story is still holding you? Naming it may be the first step out. If you've heard anything here that feels true, take the single next step. Choose one thing to release before January 19th and notice the small signs that follow. Share them with me. Tell me in the comments the one thing you're ready to release by January 19th. I'll read and highlight a few stories so we can learn from how this plays out together. Keep your expectations grounded, your attention curious, and your heart open to the quiet helpers that tend to show up when we clear the space to receive them. January 19th is the anchor, a new moon that can amplify the direction you choose. Use it as an opportunity to point the arrow with clarity, let one load fall, and watch for the subtle previews that signal something larger is beginning. The battery won't jump to full instantly, but when you stop carrying what weighs you down, you give your life permission to charge.